Welcome to the Bike Talk with Dave podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Dave Mabel, and this week we have another Mountain Bike Hall of Famer, Gary Crandall. He was the longtime director for one of the oldest continuously running mountain bike races on Earth, which began in Hayward, Wisconsin in 1983, the Chequamegon Fat Tire Festival. Gary was inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame in 2003, and though he and his partner sold the race to Lifetime a few years back and he retired a couple of years ago, he continues to show up to volunteer because he knows how important that race is to both the thousands of participants as well as his northern Wisconsin community. And without volunteers, Chequamegon just couldn't happen. And that's just how good a dude he is. So, without further ado, let's dive into the history of this 40-year-old race with so many great stories, so many great people, and so many great memories. With now, special event parking lot operations consultant, Gary Crandall. Gary Crandall, what an honor to have you on Bike Talk with Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
King of Chequamegon Fat Tire Festival, and it is celebrating 40 years. That's 1983. It's hard to believe it's been, mountain biking started in the 70s. Chequamegon was on the cutting edge of mountain bike racing and has survived all these years.
Well, and the Chequamegon was, other than the Crested Butte Fat Tire Week, which still goes on, we were the longest running multi-day event. Back in the day when we were a multi-day event, which now it's more of a focus on Saturday now.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I sent you a list of questions, and I'm, of course, thinking about this all week. And I'm like, I didn't even ask about the Sunday Fun Day and the cable criterium and the log pull and all that stuff. But yeah, that was all a part of it. And that bowl at Telemark was iconic. I always remember, and I don't know, I'm probably going to go down memory lane here a little too much, but coming out of the woods and into that bowl with the crowd and the smoke from the grills, and there's always a fire going and the noise and the music, and every now and again the helicopter would come down and land in the center of that bowl. Like, I have goosebumps thinking about it. So that. And of course, the cable criterium was held in that bowl, and just so much fun. So many great memories.
Yeah, it was fun putting together that whole weekend of, and mountain bike events, much like the mountain bike itself. There was no, decades old blueprint. It was a new sport. You could do whatever you wanted. So if you wanted to stand on the edge of a hill and toss a clunker, you could. And that became a big deal. If you wanted to do a log pull, you could. And people just really enjoyed kind of that carnival atmosphere. It wasn't just you showed up at the start line, raced, and you were done. And that's kind of how we built it. Just to a challenge, a difficult challenge, but one that you could do and your whole family could enjoy somehow.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we just enjoyed sitting on the hillside and watching the clunker toss and the log pull. And I feel like there was something with the stick, either a limbo or a high jump. Is that?
We had actually done both, but bicycle limbo was one of the ones that we did for quite a long time. And we take claim, although it no longer exists, for the concept of bicycle bowling, which we did the last few years that I was running the event, which if you take a bowling ball and swing it from one side of your bike, try to control your bike. I mean, it's a real challenge. And so that was fun to do as well.
Physics matters, doesn't it?
It absolutely, yeah.
What sparked this first ride in 1983? Where did the idea come from? And who are the characters of that event?
Right. So they're, and contrary to popular belief, while I had been the face of the Chequamegon for half of my life, I directed it for 35 years. In the first year, I actually was one of the 27 riders that rode it. And there were 5 other guys who started it, 4 of which four of which were involved in one aspect or the other of business at Telemark, which was a super thriving entity at that time. And under the guidance of Tony Wise, 10 years earlier, the American Birkebeiner had started. Basically, the guys that did PR for Tony and special events and sales, they saw, in the early 70s, Nordic skiing started. It started small. Tony had a special event for Nordic skiing, which very much similar to the Chequamegon had, I think, 30 some, 40 some, not many, but a few more people than we did the first year. And then it grew to thousands and thousands in a short time. And light bulb kicked off in those guys' heads. And it was like, hey, this can't miss. We build the initial event as a bicycle race on the Berkey Trail because
Mm-hmm.
10 years into the Berkey, people knew the Berkey Trail. It had an international recognition as a special events venue. Ironically, while we used the Berkey Trail and most of the people that were involved in the event were part of the telemark scene, just because of the way Tony Wise manage things. And he, bless his heart, he was the king of hospitality and a great special events promoter. But we knew he would take over the event. So the first 5 years of the event, the one of the principal members was Phil Rasmussen at Lakewoods. And so if people back in the day, the first 5 years we finished at Lakewoods. And it was interesting because during that 5 years was when Tony Wise and Telemark went through its first bankruptcy. So had we been at Telemark, our first challenge would have been the fact that Telemark went bankrupt. And we kind of
Yeah.
missed that. We missed that episode, although we did get to go through several other bankruptcies later on.
I was going to say that's part of the story of Telemark, and every year was kind of it was like you were chasing a moving target
Oh, for sure.
about how to hold the expo and registration and
Like the year
packet pickup and the finish line.
when they tore the Coliseum down. That
Right.
that was so. Anyway, the first 5 years we finished at Lakewoods. We caught the wave. We it's very trite to say we were the right people doing the right thing at the right time in the right place, but that's exactly what it was. And
Yeah.
we were one of the early Midwestern events. There were events in Colorado and there were events in California where we drew some of our first celebrities that came out to ride. This was different. It was a different race course. It wasn't like a course in the mountains or out in Marin County where it was real tricky single track stuff, although the concept of single track was yet to be developed. Um, uh, we were kind of a rolling Midwestern course, and people would always wonder, well, is that really mountain biking? Well, mountain biking didn't have a script to follow. Mountain biking was anywhere you could take your bike. And, the guy who was really instrumental in this and the new Silent Sports that just came out has a cover story on Phil Van Valkenburg. And Phil is Mr. Bicycle in Wisconsin. And Phil worked for Tony. He did special events for Tony and worked in the sales office. And he was the first guy I rode out in the woods with. And he had a map. He'd take his map out and his little cyclometer on his bike, and he could tell you the distance between every intersection out in the middle of the woods. This was well before Canva and well before GPS mapping. Phil was doing it with a little map tool and notes, and he's the one that designed the course, basically, that made the thing a big success.
Well, I was curious about that first course and how much of it we still use. I know the course has evolved over the years. It's certainly, I've been coming since 1999. So I've seen it evolve and I've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
sections change, even though they're still the same, they're different. Do you remember Babyhead Hill? I don't know if you called it Babyhead Hill, but we'd bomb down this loose, every rock was the size of a baby head, and we're bombing down this thing generally with generally with our eyes closed.
That was probably when you dumped off Telemark Road, Spider Lake Fire Lane, and went down this really eroded hill down to Smith Lake.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. But so that I know the course has evolved. What was that first year like, and how much of it do we still use?
Well, so interesting enough, the rail grade had been abandoned.
Hmm.
They pulled up the tracks not too many years prior to the Chequamegon. And actually, the tracks end in Hayward, and then north of Hayward, the tracks have been pulled up. And so we started on the first block of Main Street in front of Anglers. I mean, there's only 27 of us, so it was like a chalk line on the road. And what are these people doing here? And we took a left on the highway, and it wasn't too far. We picked up the railroad grade, and we rode the railroad grade north. And I remember this because one time, and I think Phil was riding, those treacherous three wheelers, that got banned
Oh, sure.
as the lead
Yep.
moto. And I remember one time he kind of went off the side of the railroad trestle. I mean, he was down in the ditch,
Oh
and
boy.
we got some old photos of people crossing the old rail trestles on the railroad grade. And then at some point we picked up the Phipps Fire Lane and started rolling on the Berkey Trail. And the last 10 miles in those first 5 years were on Rock Lake Road, which
Mm.
runs from Telemark Road to Lakewoods. That's how we finished
Yep.
it. Was on, and it was very primitive at the time. I mean, it was an old, not used forest road, and that's how we
Hmm.
finished in Lakewoods. And then, of course, when we moved to Telemark, the course had to change. So
Yeah. Was Fire Tower part of the early race course?
it was. I have. I actually Phil was the first one to take me up to the fire tower, and he actually had pictures from on top of the fire tower when the fire tower was actually there.
Oh, cool.
And but it got taken down like many of the fire towers did. But uh, and the initially the path up to the fire tower was very, very narrow. I mean, it didn't get wider and rockier until they did some logging up there one year. But um, I can't, it's a little fuzzy if we always went up the fire tower. We might have gone down the fire tower at some time. And that would have been very early on, but I'd have to check with somebody who had done it. That whole middle section of the course got really convoluted. I mean, there
Mm.
were sections we went in that nobody had been in for a really long time. Like, and the challenge was to take your vehicle in there and mark the course because it wasn't a developed ATV trail. It was an old forest road that had just grown over, and somehow Phil found point A to B to C to D and got people to the finish line. So yeah, it,
Yeah.
it changed quite a bit. There's copies of some of the old maps that I'll try to dig some up, and I'm sure I got a couple of archived PDF files of the maps. I'll send them to you. You can take a look.
Awesome. I'd love to see that and compare them to where we're going today. And I know it's gotten faster and faster. I know our time has gotten, well, we do age, so I
Well,
don't
so
know if
here
we're
I
faster,
got some
but
research on that. So Jeff, 27 people in the first year. Jeff Peterson was a rider from Menominee, Wisconsin, and he won in 2:54:10.
wow.
Okay, so and it was a 40 miler. Okay,
Hmm.
um, last year the pro time in 2022 was 2:05, so 50,
That's
50 minutes faster.
huh.
And the top woman in the first year, Jill Scott, and there were only two women. Jill Scott, she was an ice skater from Duluth that I think borrowed a bike from somebody,
Wow.
and I actually tracked her down to do an interview. I tracked her down via just social media connections and did an interview with her for our 25th, and just to find out, what her thoughts were. Her time, first woman, 4:49.
Oh wow.
And of course, a top women's time is 2:19. So 2.5 hours faster. Because the women are,
Fast.
well matched with the men.
For sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely, they are.
yeah.
Yeah.
And my time, so I finished 12th in the first year. So I was in
Oh,
50%, 3:36. So 12th place last year was 2 hours and 10 minutes. I mean, so the times have changed quite a bit.
I think my first year was around 3:36. Of course, I had bike trouble. I had a broken derailleur I had to fix with the bungee cord from my Camelback,
Oh, yeah.
and I had two gears from Martell's pothole, porthole, Martell's pothole,
Pothole. Pothole.
pothole,
Yep.
Martell's pot. What's the story of Martell's pothole? I always screw up calling it porthole. I don't know why.
Well, so I researched that story too. Martell was an area in Norway. Um, I have to go back a little bit. Daryl Daryl Thompson. So Daryl Thompson, Bodecker Road, if you talk to the locals, is referred to as Thompson's Fire Lane. That was Daryl's great granddad.
Oh,
And it got switched over to Bodecker Road. Some small town politics. Somebody's drinking buddy was town chairman, so they named it Bodecker. But um, Daryl's family settled where that Berkey Start area is, that Berkey trailhead just north of Sealy. And I interviewed Daryl about Thompson Fire Lane and Martell's, and he said Martell was a place in Norway that a lot of the settlers that ended up in Sealy came from. And
oh,
if you look at the geologic map of Martell's pothole, it appears to be an esker in a pothole, and those are both glacial features. An esker is a long, kind of narrow ridgeback. So when you're
mm-hmm.
riding, like we have an esker trail that's very close to Telemark, and you're riding on this thing, and you're on an edge, and you can look down on both sides. And then a pothole is a conical shaped hole in the ground that was left, by the glacier because it left a big chunk of ice and carved something out, and there'd always be a little water in the bottom. So try to get a USGS map and look at the topo lines in Martell's pothole. It's a challenge just to even look at it, but much less riding in and out of it. But yeah, Martell's was a place in Norway.
Oh, that's cool. That's good to know. So yeah, I broke a derailleur there and had two gears from that point on and finished. I think 3:36 was my time. So
So here you talk about mechanicals. So in the first year, Mark Stutchin, he was a guy from Chippewa, uh, really good road rider. I mean, Mark Stutchin was the kind of guy that would ride his bike from Chippewa Falls up to Grandview for the Firehouse 50, ride and win the Firehouse 50, and then he'd ride his bike home. And one of my all-time favorite Chequamegon photos is, and we're finishing at Lakewoods, is Stutchin is running his bike across the finish line. And you can see Lake Nemacolin in the background. And he had broken his chain 7 miles out
oh
on,
boy,
on Rock Lake Road. And so he ran in and then hopped on his bike and coasted down hills. But he's right ahead of my buddy Steve Chase and Dennis Cruz. And Dennis Cruz was the guy that rode all the Chequamegons up to like 35 years. He was the last of the founders. But this photo of Mark Stutchin running his bike in, just beating my two buddies at the line, and they were hammering as hard as they could. And Stutchin had broken his chain, but nobody carried a chain tool back then.
well, yeah, we did. We did. We broke a chain one of our early years, and I didn't have a chain tool. Some guy comes walking along, walking his bike, and we're 30 miles from the finish at this point in the middle of the woods. Yeah, there's no way out other than to follow the
Keep going.
race, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this dude, he had broken a pedal off. He's like, "Take my chain tool. I'm done. I'm just walking until I get out of here."
There you go.
So I've carried a chain tool ever since then and used it. That being said, we broke a chain maybe in year 4, and a mile to go. A mile to go. We're coming over one of the little rises, stand up to crank over the top of the rise, chain breaks, and I just watch it snake out from
Yeah,
behind.
yeah.
And Dee's like, "What do we do?" And I was like, "Let's just run. Let's go." So we've
That's
we've run home more than once.
a story I've heard many times. I, I've heard many times from tandem riders.
Yeah. Well, it's there's a lot of torque back there, especially with somebody like D pushing the pedals. All I do is steer the thing and shift every now and again. So let me ask you this: how did you come to be director?
Well, so I lived all over the Midwest growing up. My father, Chuck Charles, worked for Montgomery Wards for almost 40 years. So I was born in North Dakota. I lived in Ohio. I lived in every Midwestern state, with the exception of Minnesota somehow, and went to 3 different high schools. Before I graduated, from Kenosha Bradford, and I went to UW in Madison and hung out in Madison 5 years after I graduated. I had moved too much. I didn't want to move anymore. And so here I'm a successful school of business person who never interviewed. I didn't interview for a job or anything. I just kind of just did a variety of things. So I was a part-time bartender and part-time furniture mover in my last years in Madison. And my brother and sister-in-law decided they were going to leave their professional jobs and move up north. So I got the moving van and I moved them up north, literally to a house that was on the end of the power line. Okay, there was nobody was beyond their house had power, and it was dark. The power wasn't on. It was cold. It was snowing, and while we were moving them in, this good-looking single gal who lived next door came over to see who was moving in. And shortly thereafter, I left my moving job in Madison, packed everything in my Pinto wagon, and moved north. And so I had no clue what I was going to do for a living. I had no clue. Fortunately, Sarah went back to school to get her art therapy degree. And so I managed our gift shop that we ran at Telemark for 25 years. And as luck would have it, when this event started, I was the self employed guy with seasonal downtime on my hands that knew how to type. And I said, "Yeah, I'll help out. Yeah, I'll give you a hand." And I I'm pretty sure I didn't get paid anything the first year, and I might have got $50 a month the next year. And as it turned out, as the event grew astronomically rather quickly, it turned into my profession, a profession that I'd never had any training in, nor had any designs on doing. But I kind of learned that I had a skill, I guess, for project management. I think
Mm.
because special events a project.
Yep.
You got to get a lot of things lined up on time. You got to get personnel lined up. You got to get vendors lined up. You got to get timers, course marking, all that stuff. And so I'm running this gift shop that had a lot of downtime in it because it was a seasonal tourist season at Telemark at the time. And so I ended up actually renting an office space across from the gift shop. And so Fat Tire office was across the hall from the gift shop. And I kind of went back and forth and would take my projects into the gift shop when I had to, or worked out of my office. And all the other guys had a job. I mean, and then they started leaving the Telemark area. When Tony went through his bankruptcy, the people that worked for Tony moved on. I mean, they moved to South Dakota, and they moved to Madison, and they moved to wherever, Minneapolis, Salt Lake City, and so I
Hmm.
was kind of left running the thing. And I guess I did a pretty good job of it because they never fired me. You know,
You did a very good job at it for sure. Yep, for sure you did. I'm curious about when the big, uh, kind of the marquee names started showing up. It began in 1983. How long was it until some national attention was paid to it?
Well, so early on, uh, early on, and this was second, third year, I think, we were designated because we were involved with Norba at the time, which was growing.
Hmm.
Um, um, and Norba, of course, has changed, their kind of modus operandi over the year. But we aligned with them because we could get cheap insurance from them,
Oh,
and uh, we were the Midwest Championships for
oh,
for what it was worth. And so Joe Murray was the first national star that came out, and Joe Murray was basically unbeatable. I mean, he won a lot of races out west and in the mountain states. And interesting enough, Joe Murray never beat the Midwestern guys. I mean, he was bested because it was a different kind of course.
hmm,
It wasn't a course that featured grueling, hugely long climbs. We didn't have that. It was just kind of a rolly course. You were tested, but it wasn't like you were burning your lungs up because you were climbing, 5,000 feet or something. So
right.
Joe Murray was one of the first guys to come out. He came out a couple of times. The very young Fisher mountain bike team came out when I mean you just started seeing teams recognized, sponsored by, some of the luminaries of the sport. Certainly at the time, Gary Fisher was Gary Fisher. I mean,
Right.
he was his own deal. And some of the historical characters showed up in those first few years at Lakewoods. Joe Breeze,
Ooh,
one of the guys that's always been credited with developing the first mountain bike. Nobody really claims to be the inventor of the mountain bike. I mean, it developed in a couple of different ways, but if you wanted to list three guys that were most influential, Joe Breeze was one of those, and he came a couple of times. Charlie Kelly, who
oh,
was part of the originators in Marin County, California. Charlie Kelly came out and he actually, if you ever get a copy of it, he published a really good book on the history of mountain bike development. But those were some of the early guys that came out. Uh, Really before they were big stars, because later on as events grew and sponsorships grew, and media got more involved, then of course in 90 and 91 when Le Mans showed up. That was, if I had to pick one thing that just kind of made me smile more than anything, it was Greg LeMond showing up and racing. Those 90 and 91 were really, really wet years. And my prized possession of all my years running Chequamegon is my autographed Z jersey. I gave him one of my Shawama Mama jerseys and autographed it. I doubt that he's got it hanging on his wall, but I've got his jersey hanging in my art studio at home. So that was pretty cool. And he came because one of our early champions, Mark Fries from Lacrosse, Lamont was married or is married to a gal from Lacrosse, and Mark Fries was one of his training partners. But Mark Fries came, and then people like Jeff Bradley, who was on the 7-Eleven team, and Tom Schuler, and they basically goaded Lamond into coming, and it was his first mountain bike race. He had never done a mountain bike race, and of course he did quite well. I mean, he we shortened the course both of those years that he won, and then of course he was a lot of other people that were pretty famous names like Bob Roll.
oh,
Bob Roll could have been on the podium, but he could have won the event, but he missed an arrow like coming
oh,
into the stadium. And Rishi Graywall was here, and Ned Overend. So a lot
yep.
of top people, and of course everybody remembers Tilford's presence at the
Mhm.
event. Steve Tilford. He became a frequent flyer. Steve Tilford and Catherine Wahlberg, several time women's champion, and Catherine still still in the game. She's got some youth teams that she's working with, and she still races. And of course, we lost Topher tragically a few years back in an automobile accident. But he was so fun to have around. He just
Oh yeah, he always animated any event. He was, I'm from Des Moines, and he would come up and race here in Des Moines or around Iowa,
oh yeah,
and it was always a delight when that old van would pull up with he
yeah,
and Catherine and whatever Topeka folks would
yeah.
show up.
Bill Stolte
Um,
and some
yeah, yeah,
some
yep.
of the other and they still travel in mass. I mean, they would come up for Chequamegon. They'd come up Christmas to New Year's in cable just to ski.
He put a stamp on that thing. I don't know how many years, but I know it was. We would ask ourselves, "Oh, did Tilford win again? Who won? Tilford? Yep, Tilford won again.
Well, he
Three,
was
4 years,
well he was the first three-peat. He was
first three-peat.
he was a three-peat. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And he also would own the cable criterium, as I recall.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was pretty famous for doing those dirt crits. Like
Yep.
the name escapes me. One of those races out west where they do multi-day things. He very tactical racer, very
Mm-hmm.
tactical
Oh
racer.
yeah. Yep.
I,
Yep.
I've got a memory of him where I'd say I don't think it was an illegal move, but he kind of put the squeeze on Dewey Dickey right before the
Oh,
finish line. There was Dewey thought he was going to cut Steve off on a corner, and that didn't happen. That was never going
yeah.
to happen.
That was always an interesting finish line, at least the one in Telemark, when you come down, drop into the bowl, and you kind of have to climb back out,
Oh
make a
yeah,
right hand turn, and you got 100 yards left. And I'll never forget when, speaking of finish line happenings, the Eppens pop out of the woods in first and had what, 7 people lined up behind them, and they bomb down that hill and go around that corner, and a tandem has, it's like driving a Mack truck, and you go uphill and everybody just goes around them and on. But they came close to winning that thing.
well, and I think they won up at Order Shore one time because that's a pretty measured roll in, not quite so dynamic as the 40 finish. But the interesting thing about that finish that the Eppens were I think they finished seventh, but in that top seven, and I think this was I I wonder if that was the same year that Lalonde won on a single speed.
I was just about to say that. I think Jesse Lalonde won on a single speed.
So that was 2007, our 25th anniversary, which certainly was one of the huge notable events. Like it was like what?
Yep.
But that group, it had a tandem, a 26-inch mountain bike, a 29-inch mountain bike, had a single speed,
Yep. I
had a
remember that.
had a cyclocross bike. I mean the course lent itself that
Y-
you could ride whatever you
Yep.
wanted, depending on the conditions. But yeah, the Eppens were great entertainment.
They would always be finished with their podium before we got home. I'll never forget
Yeah,
crossing the
yeah,
finish
yeah,
line and
yeah,
looking at the logs over to our left, and there's the Eppin standing on the top of the log. It was like, well, we weren't in the top
yeah.
three again.
And great, and you certainly were part of some of those great tandem battles. There was just some super great tandem. Paddock, Curtis Paddock, and Chad McGrath raced
Hmm.
tandem a number of times. Dave Preman raced with his
Yep.
wife and two of his kids, not on the same year, but like he was on the podium several times in one event or the other, just because they would swap different partners out,
Yep.
you know,
Yep. You're right about
and
that.
and always a great story. The tandem riders, there was always something going on.
Fast tandem riders. It was always
Oh
a
yeah, yeah,
super competitive field because it was a great race for tandem.
exactly. I don't know if you ever saw it. I think you go search for it, you can find it. But the Eppens did a GoPro video of the 40 one time,
Oh,
and and just to watch and listen to them, what's going on, especially in the rollout. I mean, it's just like you're on a rocket ship, and just once they start winding that up, another you talk. I was just talking champions. Another real interesting story, Dave, was Jeff Hall. Jeff Hall, who still races and is still competitive, but Jeff won the 40 when he was 19 years old. He'd earlier won the short and fat, but when he was 19, he won the 40, and then he won it again when he was 40 years old.
oh,
Like,
wow.
yeah, yeah. So that was quite a gap, like a 20-year gap between championships, and just always kind of just a quiet competitor,
Yep.
and great women champions too. Jenna Reinhardt. Jenna's just super gal. Won it 6 times.
Yep.
And Olympians like Leah Davidson raced a couple of times and won, and of course Catherine Wahlberg and some of those other people, some of the other pros that show up, and always gracious. The pros that would show up were always, and now they got a big pro purse, like it's a whole different deal now.
It is a whole different deal for sure.
Yeah, yeah, there's a separate pro purse. So
Yep. Which is cool. We get to kind of watch them finish. However, I was still cleaning the mud out of my ears when the pro kids came in. They didn't beat us, however, which was good. But yeah, we kind of missed the finish because we're still trying to get the mud off of. That was the
yeah,
muddiest. That was last year was the muddiest year we've ever done. It just poured on us. Exactly hitting Martell's pothole. We're
oh yeah,
just about to
yeah.
dive into that, and a clap of thunder, and it is dark as night, and the rains come, and then we're dropping down that sandy gully into the
Oh, that
pothole.
super eroded thing that we've. I'm all into sustainable and responsible riding. We if we're going to go down into Martell's, that's the only way we can get down in there. I mean, there is the Canvas single track, but that's just inaccessible for any emergency vehicle or anything like that. So we've gone in and fixed that, and that trail was an old skidder trail from way back when they logged it.
Oh
You
wow,
know, I mean, that's why it was created. It was a skidder trail,
huh?
but it's just rock and sand, and it just washes away every year.
It
And
does wash away. We used to walk it. Now we ride it. And boy, I took a big gulp this year and I was just like, D, I'm just going to try to not kill us and make it through this thing. But that's exactly where the
yes,
heavens opened. And
yeah, yeah,
it,
that's a good goal. That's a good goal.
such
Yeah,
a muddy year. Speaking of interesting years, I was there in 2001 and
yeah,
Chequamegon was exactly 1 week after the attacks of
yeah.
September 11th. Yet you held the race anyway. What went into that decision? And I want to hear your overall sense of that weekend.
I don't have it anymore because it was on my work computer, but I saved every single email I got from people that I responded to. I was always really good at responding to emails,
Agreed.
and just to hear the outpouring from people, um, they wanted to come but they couldn't come. Um, uh, they were amazed that we were holding the race. Why didn't we cancel a race? And I'm glad it happened far enough away from the event weekend that we had time to just compose ourselves and certainly not get over the shock, because it was historically the most shocking thing that's happened to any of us in our lives, I would say. Um, but we sat down and we talked about it, and we decided, there's a lot of people that uh, need something to hold on to. They need something. They need some sanity in their life. They need something that'll reassure them that things are okay. And I would say from a competitive, side of things, it was probably the mellowest race that ever happened because people, I'm choking up just thinking about it. People were bonded by the fact that they made it to Chequamegon and that we ran it. And I'm very glad that we ran the race. Contrary, there were some people that didn't think we should, but ultimately we had to make the decision what we wanted to do. And um, yeah, I was wondering what was it? 2001. That was a Tilford year.
Yeah.
I took a lot of time to just to exchange with people, what was going on, where were they, and I had people that were going to fly out from the East Coast, and they packed it in a pickup truck and drove out,
Oh, wow.
you know, just so they could be a part of it because nobody was flying,
Right.
nobody was flying in then, but
Right.
yeah, that was certainly, yeah, that was a really big time,
Yeah. That
Well, you
was,
figure 40 years of this event, my 35 years at the helm, there was some pretty significant things that happened, and that certainly was something that kind of woke everybody up to a sadly new reality.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, for sure. I was thankful you had it, and I'll just never forget. That's the quietest, I don't know, 1,000 people, 1,500 people have ever been for the playing of the national anthem.
oh my gosh, yeah, 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 for sure, yeah,
It was amazing. So thank you for holding it that year. But
yeah, yeah, you bet.
Telemark has been through a lot, and I know that
Oh, right,
that
yeah,
things are a little very different now. But gosh, you went through every ounce of Telemark ownership or lack of ownership. What was that like every year chasing that bouncing ball, chasing that moving target with where to hold? Because in the early years I was there was a pasta dinner at Telemark Lodge, packet pickup, the expo was
yeah,
inside, and then it wasn't, and then the lodge was closed, and then we could shower, and then it just every year was something different. And
yep,
how hard
yep.
was that for you to chase that moving target?
Well, I tell you, Dave, and I've said this all throughout. I may have had some organizational skills, but my long term staff, they were the best at problem solving. I kept a length of service spreadsheet, and after 35 years, I had people that had been with me for 35 years, or 25 years, or 20, or I mean, at the end there, of course, we were all aging, you know, but uh, the people I had on my staff that were, they were from Cable, and they were from Hayward, and from Namacoggin, and from Sealy. Whatever we had to do, uh, they knew what we had to put together to do it. I mean, when they tore the Coliseum down, that was our source of power. So where are we going to get power? And I remember we took power. I remember that I used to call it Little Chernobyl. They took power out of the lift shack down at the
Oh,
base of the hill, and it was like a 440, three-phase circuit or something. And Ernie from outside maintenance somehow built some kind of step down, transformer or something. And I thought, oh my God, this thing could blow the whole thing up, but somehow, and that's how we got power, you know, and then of course we got into the big tent,
mm-hmm.
so that was a really fun thing. Once the Coliseum was finally cleaned up, uh, well, let's pitch a big tent, and well, that was super fun.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed putting the big tent up.
that
Because
became home. That became Schwamigan home.
that was Chequamegon home.
Yeah,
And and we had to figure out how to do the food vending, um, and now I tell you, there's good things on the horizon with the Berkey acquiring the property. Very good things. the lodge is gone, that's a good thing. I'll be the first person to say that. I was pretty involved with it. Sarah and I owned one of the timeshares, and I for good or bad, I became a timeshare owner. I was on their board. I was the president of the board through 10 difficult years. And so, I was impacted more by telemark, not just the event, but the fact that the timeshare association was about to go down because they had acquired the lodge, and they didn't have enough money to make a go of it. And but the whole property there, that was almost 1,000 acres. That property was going nowhere to be developed until that lodge left,
Hmm.
because the lodge was a huge liability. I mean, you and I could have scraped together the money to buy the thing,
Right.
but we would have had to do something with the lodge.
Right.
And so that the Berkey acquired the property, did some good fundraising. And they're doing it's not a top heavy development. Top heavy would be, let's buy the lodge, try to fix up the lodge, and make it go again. Well, there was so much negative marketing towards telemark and what it had gone through, and it was really dated. And I mean, the place was just falling apart. So that it was quite interesting to watch it get torn down. And
Hmm.
I took many bike rides over there just to watch them do it, as many people did. But now what's going on with how the Berkey's developing it, and they've got some partnerships, and uh, it's going to be really good. It's going to be really good. More events, more different types of events, and yeah, it's Trex ponied up a sizable chunk of change. They're going to be one of their development partners on the new trail system, and this other organization, One Track Mind, which is a new organization run by a Chequamegon competitor, actually. Um, give it a few more years. You're going to be, and I think they're working out their relationship with the Chequamegon better. And my hope, because the Berkey picked up the Bora Epic, the uh, long marathon single track race, and also gravel race. It's a 2-day event. They just had it a couple of weeks ago. Um, but they moved the finish line back to the ski hill. They're
Oh,
not using the Berkey start area where the ski races start. They moved it back. I mean, the old finish tower is sitting right on the hill where I used to put it up, and they're starting to reuse that venue. So, I'm hoping that sometime maybe they'd work that out with Chequamegon, and they'd think of doing that.
yeah.
You know,
That's kind of cool. I feel like Phoenix beginning to rise from the ashes.
that's a very, yeah, very good thing, and it's been a lot of years. I mean,
Oh
the thing's
gosh.
been it's been a lot of years, and it's I used to, so when I was on the we were the last gift shop standing there, and I was part of the timeshare association. So I would do uh, Monday morning timeshare guest orientation. Like, they'd have a little coffee and donut thing on Monday morning, when the timeshare guests had checked in the night before, and I could do 55 years of troubled telemark financial history in about 8 minutes, like without notes. Like, I mean, because that was always the question, and if I thought about it, I could do it for you now, but I'm going to spare you the agony. But yeah, I used to talk about all the different phases of what happened, and now, sure, Tony went bankrupt, he lost it, his empire is gone, but now, there's more of a resurgence, and they're recognizing Tony Wise for the huge entrepreneurial visionary and special events proponent that he is. And in the new Birch Scroll coming out, actually, I just got interviewed for an article about Tony, and there's going to be a plaza, and there's going to be a statue of Tony and some of the other people that were important to Telemark. So they're retaining and reviving that history. And so let's remember the good things, and move on to the next phase. And I think you'll see that happen.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We haven't even talked about Fat Tracks, the newspaper you would publish twice a
Yeah,
year, but pre-internet, I would wait for that Fat Tracks to find out the status of Telemark. Like,
Oh
oh, is it
yeah.
going to be there? Is it going to be open? Is it going to be closed? We going to have a place to shower? We going to have pizza after the race? Like, what's the status of Telemark? And you'd find out twice a year in the Fat Tracks newspaper.
And I remember the one Fat Tracks I wrote when you could first start to find things on a web page.
Mm,
I mean, I mean, I mean, I used to type all my letters with a manual typewriter for Pete's sakes, you know. I
right,
mean,
right.
you know, and so yeah, that whole, and then Fat Tracks, I learned how to do that from Tom Kelly, who was one of the originators of the event. He was Tony's PR guy. Tom was a guy that was laying down in the middle of Highway 63 and took the picture of Bob Chatterton in his church pants coming around the corner. That nobody has that shot. We got like the most iconic, as far as I'm concerned, iconic shot in the history of mountain bike is that shot with the old Hayward Hotel in the background. Tom went on to be the communications director, PR guy for the Ski Association after he left Telemark for a very successful career. He's in the Skiing Hall of Fame, and
Wow.
I still see him and communicate with him. But he taught me how to write Fat Tracks, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing those stories, and especially after the race and interviewing people and learning how things shook out there. But yeah, but that's gone. Nobody does print media anymore.
That is an accurate statement. But we did always enjoy when Fat Tracks would show up in the mailbox. My
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
my whole claim to fame was actually 2001 was my third year, and I had three goals: break 3 hours, make it up Fire Tower without stopping or putting a foot down,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and make the front page of Fat Tracks. And I did all three, and I haven't ridden my single bike since. We've been tandem ever since. So
So what was it? I'll have to see if I can find a copy of it.
2001, I guarantee you, I still have a copy somewhere because I
Yeah.
was excited about that.
Well, and you go back to that. So when that first started, actually, I was just down at the print shop in Hayward this morning that printed Fat Tracks. That was back when we shot everything black and white, and I would get contact sheets, and I would take my little loop, and I'd look at these, and then we'd go, okay, this one, this one, this, and we'd print them. There was no digital, nothing, and when you went to lay the newspaper out, they'd spit the copy out on the shiny paper that you cut with an X-Acto knife, and then you rolled hot beeswax on the bottom, and you laid the columns down. And so I would go and help them lay the thing out, and yeah, you'd actually have these actual boards that you would wax up your copy, and so yeah, boy, that technology changed.
Oh boy, has it.
Yeah,
I'm just blown away that like that was part of putting Fat Tracks together.
that was part of putting Fat Tracks together. Yeah,
That just
yeah,
means you've been around a long time, though, Gary, right?
yeah, I guess.
I'm curious about how you came to make the decision to sell Chequamegon and why Lifetime.
Sure, that's a good question. Um, well, so all the guys that had started the event. I mean, I was 30 years into running the event, so getting near to whatever's considered retirement time, as were all of the other guys, the other five guys that were involved, and we we didn't have a lot of you know directors meetings, but we would meet once a year, and we'd always talk about, well, what's the next step? Do we, when Gary gets ready to go, do we hire a new director, have him kind of oversee it, and hang on to the ownership? Do we sell it? And predominantly, the guys thought that selling it was the best idea. And Lifetime had approached us about buying it. I would say for years,
Hmm.
for a number of years. They recognized it as a good event, and a lot of Lifetime people had come, and they were sponsor for a while there before they owned the event. But um, the other guys, and this was after we had bought an office. We got out of telemark. We bought an office so that we had our own place, and kind of the theory, Dave, was that the best time to sell something is when somebody wants to buy it. And
True.
so it kind of happened. The decision wasn't hasty, but there was all of a sudden we were talking about selling the event, and we had actually talked. Had it been a few years later, it might have gone to the Berkey,
Huh.
but the Berkey wasn't acquiring other events. The Berkey didn't particularly like the Chequamegon event on the Berkey Trail
Oh.
because we there's a little wear and tear there, which we were always responsible for fixing or financing its repair, but they weren't into the multiple event promotions that they are now. I mean, the Berkey would have bought it in a heartbeat, but it wasn't at that time.
Hmm.
And I had a couple of other private people that had come to me earlier and just said, what are your plans? I'm kind of interested, and I cold called the people out at Leadville. Ken
Kluber.
oh, Ken Klober, yeah. I called him up and just said, "Hi, Ken," and told him who I was, and they had acquired Leadville like a year, 2 years earlier, and I just asked him what was his experience,
Hmm.
what did he feel about that, and it it turned it into a different reality because you couldn't have a more hometown event than the Chequamegon. I mean, it was me going into the office, working with my buddies, and but it was clear that this was an organization that had the chops to perpetuate it, you know, and it was important to us to perpetuate the event. I mean, that was really because everybody that got the event started, again, they were somehow tied into the tourist industry in the local area, and this was a boon. This
Hmm.
was a very, very important thing. It was an off-season promotion. I mean, we picked the exact right time to do it. There's very little off-season up here now, but um, our one of our bottom line goals was to perpetuate the event for the betterment of the community, and so we negotiated that with Lifetime, and the interesting thing is after being self-employed, self owner of the event for many years, I got myself a corporate job, and so all of a sudden, I wasn't doing my own payroll. I wasn't writing my own checks anymore. I didn't have a checkbook anymore. I had to go through the corporate accounts receivable and accounts payable, and there were other people making decisions, and they were quite nice. They let me run the event. I would say there were very few times that they made decisions that I wasn't happy with. I mean, things were pretty copacetic,
Hmm.
and then the time came. I told them I'd work. I'd run the event for. We had nothing in writing, but I told them I'd do it for 5 years after we sold the event, and I think it ended up being 6 years. And initially, like anything, nobody likes change. I mean, anytime there's a change, somebody's going to speak up about the change they don't like. I'm never coming back there again. And I go, we need to move on,
Right.
and so some people didn't come again. Some people took a break and then they came back. And certainly the format of the event changed. We were talking about the multi-day thing. We made the decisions to limit the enrollment in the event just to maintain our own sanity, and we made the decisions to again maintain the sanity of the staff. We just kind of whittled away those Sunday events. We
Right.
just we just didn't do them anymore because the people that did them loved them, we loved putting them on, but they were a ton of work for a little bit of participation. And now you look at formats, multi-day events like the Berkey's, their Epic Bike Fest. They do a big single track one day, and then they do a big gravel race the next day. Well, that would have been a great idea, but
Right. Right.
there was no gravel race. We're trying to get off of gravel. Things changed, and I think people have gotten over it. And I think Lifetime's done well. They have a larger vision. With their whole pro thing that they're doing.
Hmm.
You run. I was never a fan of giving a prize purse. I always said if I had an extra $20,000, I was never hesitant to say I'd give myself a raise. I'd give Trish, who was my office person for 25 years, a raise, and I'd have a better volunteer party.
Mm.
That's what I would do with $10,000 rather than give it to 6 people, or 10 people. You offer a big prize purse and all those top dogs come like their Lifetime Grand Prix, all of a sudden you've got media exposure that you never had before. And if you have media exposure, then that helps with your sponsorships. I'm sure all of their sponsorships that they have more zeros after them than anything I ever
Hmm.
did. Because I didn't offer that. I didn't offer that big media exposure. And there was, well, what did I know from social media? I mean, that was, I was just learning that when I checked out.
Yes.
Now I think I could do okay on it, but
Social media was fat tracks twice a year showing up in your mailbox.
social media was fat tracks. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What did 35 years of Chequamegon bring to you?
I tell you, in I'm learning this more and more every day. I live in a wonderful community. This cable, Sealy, Hayward, Drummond, this community up here, uh, it's all connected. I continue to volunteer for every event. It's parking. I'm a car parking guy, and that's what I'm known for. And I have my little crew, and that's what I organize now. And people look to me when they want to start something, like what does your experience tell? If we do this, will this be a good idea? Well, I can't tell you if it'll be a good idea or not, but I can tell you some things to avoid maybe. But I would say the sense of community that we have here, I am super happy to be living in the situation that I have. Very busy in my retired life. My wife is a very successful artist, and I help manage her art career. She might be the artist, but I'm accounts payable, accounts receivable, shipping, receiving, all of that, publicist. Like I was working on a press release for her today, so I'm doing a lot of the similar things I did in the office. I'm just doing it in our own world, but. Yeah, it just taught me the importance of making connections in a community and people helping each other out, and that's something that happens in this community quite a bit
Yeah.
with all the different events and the sports group. I mean, there are so many groups. Like you said, you were going for a ride tonight. I manage a Tuesday morning gravel ride. There's a Wednesday road mountain bike ride. There's a Thursday night ride. I mean, there are so many gatherings of like-minded people to do healthy things that I might have had a little something to do with that, like the development of Canva. I
Yeah.
mean, I raised a lot of money for Canva
Hmm.
through the event, and that was quite a legacy. I like that. I'll take that.
Yeah. Well, I'd say you definitely have left a legacy of memories, of Canva, of great weekends up in the North Woods, of great friends. I know I speak for literally thousands of people in thanking you for nurturing that race along and helping it
Yeah,
continue to become what it is, which is,
I was a lucky guy to have been entrusted with that by the guys that started the race. Yeah,
well, we're lucky
yeah.
that you were helping run a gift shop in the North Woods and had
That's
some
smart.
time on your hands and were able to put in the kind of time it needed. But
Self-employed guy with seasonal downtime on my
it
hands.
was
That's
perfect combination. Perfect combination. So, Gary, I want to thank you too for spending time with me to talk about the last 40 years.
oh, it's a great connection. Yeah, it was a great connection, Dave. Thanks. And of course, I remember you guys riding a tandem. But I'm not going to say you were my favorite tandem. That my favorite tandem, and I can't remember the guys' names, but they showed up more than one year on a single speed steel tandem wearing leisure suits and wings.
Yep, I remember. And I'm pretty sure we usually beat them because we're like, see those guys, we got to take them down. And I think they were 4 or 5 hour. Of course, we've been 4 or 5 hours a time or two, but I know who you're talking about.
They had to be pushing that beast up the hill, just about every hill they rode.
For sure. They were great guys. They were great guys. A lot of great tandems over the years. It was kind of fun. We would often see some of the same people on tandems
Oh yeah.
each year, which is
Oh yes.
kind of fun.
Yeah. So next time you come to the event, parking cars usually one morning out of the.
I will
And
I'll
the
look
other
for you.
the other places I go after the fire tower climb. So after I get done parking cars, I go out and do course control. After you climb the fire tower and you're coming off the fire tower and head back south, I'm right at that corner. My only regret is I get to see everybody, but everybody's moving pretty fast at that point. They're losing elevation. So
Is that where we turn right and head onto the Berkey with like 9 miles to go?
no, I'm at the top of so you come over the fire tower climb, and then you start descending over the top of the fire tower, and you actually take a sharp left.
Oh, I can picture where you're talking. Yep.
And then you're heading back to that turn where you go back up to the Berkey Hill. Yeah, I'm more at the top of that climb. Yeah, you're about to lose all of the elevation that you just won by climbing the fire tower.
I love that section because fire tower is so hard and you're kind of anxious about it for so many miles, and then you finally hit it and you head up it and you get up and over it, and somebody gives you a bratwurst, or I got a shot of maple syrup this year.
Oh yeah.
I've had a shot of beer. They're handing Twizzlers, Twinkie. I've had Twinkie at the top, all kinds of stuff. But just so glad to get over that. And then that next section, like, it's a long downhill, and on a tandem, that's just a delight.
You're rocking, and then you get into what they call the Seven Sisters, the climbs back up to the high point. Then
I have to tell you, the very first year I did it, 1999, I'm in this Seven Sisters part on the Berkey Trail, and there's people like off to the side of the trail sitting on the hillside, and I'm like, what are they doing there? Why are they just sitting there? We've got 7 miles to go, 8 miles to go. Why are they just sitting there? And then a mile later, I'm going up one of those climbs, and both of my legs just seize up. I could not pedal. And I was like, oh, that's what they were doing there. They couldn't move. Oh, that hurt so bad.
Joe Parkin, I was interviewing Joe Parkin once. I don't know if you remember that name. He was on a European team for a long time, and one of the big names that won in the early 90s. But I was interviewing him about that climb because usually somebody's making a break there, and he says, yeah, I don't know what was going on, but I was looking around for a place I could build a cabin. Like he was moving so slow, he was looking for some property.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I can relate to that for sure.
Well, and just a hot tip, if you ever get a chance, go ride it in the opposite direction because it really rolls nice the other way.
It does it? So it was by design, you had us ever climbing up those Seven Sisters.
That was Phil's deal.
Yeah.
That was Phil's deal. So, hey, enjoy your ride tonight.
All right.
Thanks for the interview.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And we'll look for you in the parking lot.
Thanks again for listening today. And thanks tons to Gary Crandall for making time to talk with me. It was a real honor that he agreed to come on, and a real treat to see him again. And I will look forward to seeing him again this fall in the parking lot. Maybe we'll see a bunch of you up there as well. If you enjoyed today's show, I would love it if you would rate and review on your favorite podcast platform and give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook. When you do, it really helps grow the show's audience. Now, if you really love the show and you want to see it continue and thrive, feel free to support it financially. Just look for the Bike Talk with Dave podcast at buymeacoffee.com, and when you do, I'll be happy to send you a sticker. I'd like to thank both Chain and Spoke Coffee as well as BikeIowa.com for supporting the show. BikeIowa.com is the online host of Bike Talk with Dave. BikeIowa.com has one of the most extensive list of cycling events anywhere, from mountain bike races to party rides. Bike Iowa has it all, including the Core 4 on August 19th, and I'm planning on being there to tackle the gravel, single track, and pavement, and I'd love to see you there as well. Check it out. Are you looking for your next epic cycling adventure? We've got one for you this summer that challenges all the surface types. When the folks at Core 4 say no surface untouched, they mean it. Champagne gravel, pavement, speedy single track, and all the level B roads. Core 4 doesn't stop at 4 surface types. They've got an ethos to get all bodies on bikes, and it comes through initiatives which support socioeconomic justice, gender equality, and bike advocacy. It's all about community, opportunity, recreation, and engagement at Core 4. Go early, bring the fam. They've got everything: bikes, bevs, packet pickup party at Big Grove, live music, free camping, and finish line fun for all. Do not miss the No Surface Untouched action in Iowa City on Saturday, August 19th. 100, 50, and 25-mile options. Follow along on Instagram at Core4Bike and get in the lineup. I'm also excited to head to Lincoln, Nebraska on August 25th, where Dee and I will be sailing our tandem through the gravel seas in the 75-mile version of the Gravel Worlds. Remember, you can find Core 4 and so many more events, gravel, mountain bike, road, whatever you like, at BikeIowa.com. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week for even more awesome bike adventures. And remember, you can find every episode and stream them right on your computer or your device from anywhere at biketalk.bike. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the trails.